Well, hi there, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Real Estate Investing. I'm your host, Sharon Vornholt, and I'm so happy you're tuning in today. My guest today is Omni Casey. He's a real estate investor, broker, and a coach for nearly 20 years now. He grew up in Hawaii, and that's where he started his real estate career. Omni and his family have lived in Northern Virginia for more than 10 years now, where they've been growing their real estate investment portfolio and a top performing real estate team. And I love that he has gotten his children involved in this business. So welcome to the show, Omni.
Thank you for having me, Sharon. Excited to be here.
Well, you have an interesting story, and I'm always in amazement when people move from a faraway place like Hawaii to the eastern coast of the U.S. and start their business. So let's tell everyone a little bit about how you got started in real estate.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I'm born and raised in Hawaii. My story started out there. All my family's, still out there. So clearly when I was thinking about what I wanted to do with my life, I was, 20, 21 at the time trying to figure it out. I was an entrepreneur and, have dove into multiple, little businesses that I was running. And so I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. We were having a conversation before this. You talking about someone that's quote unquote unemployable. I'm unemployable as well. I need to own businesses. I need to run businesses. And at some point I realized real estate was a really, really cool business as well. Like many, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that was a mindset shift for me. And then that kind of went me down the path of discovery of real estate. At the moment I was working at a surf shop. I was fixing and flipping surfboards while selling surfboards. So I understood the concept of adding value to something, making it better and earning a profit off of that. And the transition into real estate was an easy concept for me to get once I understood that. So I was lucky enough to, put my head down, find the right mentors, find the right groups, coaches. And over the last 20 years, I've done almost every type of real estate investing you can think of. Long distance investing from Hawaii. Hawaii is very expensive. So I learned how to invest in other states where I'm not there and had to learn how to build teams so that they could manage my investments for me. We primarily now focus on long-term buy and hold properties. And I moved out to the mainland, Northern Virginia, right outside of DC. This is where my wife is from. So we got to a point where our location didn't matter as much, and she wanted to be back closer to family, and our lifestyle allowed us to make that change, and I've been blessed ever since.
The weather is definitely nicer in Hawaii.
It's hard to argue with that. Yes.
So I commend you for doing that. I know that property is very expensive in Hawaii, and to make a move like that and start all over, and that must have been really, really challenging in some ways.
It is. Whether it was the hardest challenge, to be honest, there's culture shock because the Hawaii technically, I think, is part of the United States, but it's a whole different world out there. It is like growing up in a different, country. Sometimes there's a different culture there. And so more culture shock than anything. But I love it here. We're in a beautiful area. I would say the skill of real estate is transferable no matter where you go. If you understand how to be successful in real estate, and I was a real estate investor and became a real estate broker as well. So my active income was real estate and my passive income and investing was real estate as well. So my world has been consumed by real estate for the last 20 years. Every business that I kind of venture into has some sort of tie to real estate, as well. And so I got really good at that business while in Hawaii, and it got to a point of we can move anywhere and I can be good at that business. It's going to take a lot of work to build the networks or those local connections that I know are important, but that's something that I was willing to do and was able to do that here. And I talk about that all the time. People are worried about making moves to other markets. Learn the skill set, learn the principles, learn how to be successful. And then you can make that transfer almost anywhere if you're in the real estate space.
It's interesting that you started out as an investor and that was your primary thing. And then you got your license. Some people do it that way. Some people do it the other way. But I like that you had sometimes it's hard for agents if they don't have someone to teach them about investors. It's hard to understand the investor mindset and the bigger paydays they want. when you're used to a commission-based business. So that is sometimes a challenge for investors.
It is. And so knew nothing about being a real estate agent, nothing. And to be honest, I got my license not because I wanted to be a real estate agent or a real estate broker. It was a barrier to information. My agent wasn't investor friendly, starting out. And so I was like, all right, I got to figure out how to get this access. And wasn't that hard to get my license. At no point did I research, do I want to be a real estate agent and what's that business like? That being said, at some point after I got my license and I was my main client, and then I started to look at the business of being a real estate agent and then eventually a real estate broker, and realized that that was a really, really cool business as well. It was an active income business, just like any other job. But I got really good, found mentors, coaches, masterminds in that space at being a real estate agent and broker, made money that way. And that allowed me to make money and have more money to invest passively, because at some point you need to earn active income to convert that to passive income. And I could have easily had any other job out there. Real estate, I just made that my active income job, and made a focus of making sure that was always converted to passive income.
And that's something that everybody needs to understand. You need income because you don't have borrowing power, for one thing. A bank's not going to want to necessarily loan you money unless you've been a long-term investor and you can take in the tax returns that show that you have a profitable business. So don't quit your day job, folks. If you have a day job, don't quit your day job to begin investing, because you need that. I think it's so interesting that you have built a brokerage alongside your real estate investing business. And I can totally see where that would be a win-win for you. Now, how big is your brokerage? And I understand, if I understand from something I read somewhere when I was reading about what you do, that you teach these people to look for investment properties, and maybe you try to teach them to be investors themselves. Do I have that right?
That's exactly it. I right now we have about give or take about 100 agents at my location, and been doing it about 10 years leading this location. And starting out as an agent, I didn't talk about investing that much. I did my own thing, and then the occasional agent would come to me, and just like any business, there's mentors, and you have mentors, and you become a mentor, and then slowly my mentees, I'm helping them to learn how to sell real estate, but also, like, what are you doing on investing? I came from investing, so I assumed every real estate agent was an investor. I assumed everyone had that knowledge. Why would you be in real estate and not be a real estate investor? It made no sense to me. So it wasn't a big topic of conversation for me, because I just assumed behind the scenes, that's what everyone did. It took me several years to realize the vast majority of real estate agents were not real estate investors, had no idea what or how to even do that. And then slowly said, all right, I need to not just help teach people, my mentees, and eventually kind of took on a bigger coaching role as growing an office, helping them earn active income, but with the sole purpose of exactly what I did. How do you convert that to passive income? At some point, I don't care if you make $100,000 or $1 million this year, at some point it's going to run out. You're going to stop working. You're going to want to stop working, or you're going to run out of energy, or something's going to happen where you can't do it anymore. And if you can't close transactions and that active income stops, what is your plan after that? Savings is usually not especially in our inflationary environment, savings, your nest egg, is usually not something you can count on, because $2 million in the bank or whatever it is, 2 years from now or 3 years from now might mean something completely different. You thought that was enough. And so it really is a passive income that can scale with inflation. Clearly, rents is one of those things that can happen. And so teaching my agents to earn income and to convert that into rental properties or some sort of passive income has kind of been my passion. Over the last few years, they said, hey, can we bring in friends or family and clients? And then we turned it into more of a public education club, if you will. The book that I published, Cash Flow Breakfast Club, is kind of a narrative of that club, narrative of someone. It was my story growing up in Hawaii, becoming an investor, becoming an agent, and the path that I took to financial freedom through real estate investing. But it's around the concept of finding a group, because I didn't do it by myself. And I don't know if anyone can really do it by themselves. Finding mentors, coaches, masterminds is probably key to reaching the top in any field, industry, or investment that you want to get to. And I was just blessed to have that. And I try to provide that to as many people as possible now.
One point that you made that I am totally in agreement with is that that in realtors, if they don't have some type of training around investors, they don't know what they don't know. And when I look back at my very first few deals, I've had a realtor who was in my investment group, which was about 500-600 people at the time. And I assumed that because she knew all these investors and she worked with all these investors, that she knew how to make smart decisions when it came to property. And that could not have been further from the truth. I knock on wood, I like to say I've never lost money on a deal, but I had some really slim deals in the beginning because she did not understand the profit margins. And I was like 5 minutes into being a real estate investor. So having that kind of guidance, I always tell people, don't have an agent that is not an investor. I feel the same way about my closing attorney, my real estate attorney. I like to have a real estate attorney that's also an investor, because when things go sideways, they know how to fix things. And all the creative things that we like to do, they're familiar with those, first of all. When sometimes I do a lot of probates, and probate attorneys, they're very good at probates, but they may not be so good at some of the crazy creative things that real estate investors do. I've been told wholesaling is illegal way before it was even a question in some states, but all sorts of things. So I think you need to align yourself with the right people. And the part about mentors, gosh, where would we be without mentors and role models? And I would like to dive into that, since we already touched on that, the role that they've played in your business, and how you, when you're trying to find a mentor, you have to be able to offer something back to them. You have to have an idea of what you can do to help them. You don't want to give them another job, as in show me what to do, these 5 things. But how to approach someone to even mentor you is just so important.
It is. And I think understanding, and it took me a while to figure this out as well, understanding a mentor and a coach is a different thing. And so first off, everyone needs both mentors and coaches, right? And for various aspects of our life. And I, to this day, have mentors, and I, to this day, have coaches as well. And those evolve based on what your plans are. So understanding a mentor and a coach is different. A mentor is a peer in whatever you're doing, someone that is doing and has done what you're doing. In terms of adding value, that's so important, because if someone's currently doing it, they're not actively looking for people to be mentees, because the reality is that's work, right? That's a job. They probably are in this entrepreneurial world because they don't want to be managing a ton of people, and that's almost like what it is, an employee that's not pulling their own weight, that you're not getting anything out of, right? So so understanding what can you do from the get-go to offer value to someone is so important. My first mentor, who I met over selling him a surfboard at this surf shop, when I was kind of thinking about this transition, I started to talk to everyone about real estate. Right? And there was no podcasts at that time. There's no Bigger Pockets. There's no YouTube of how do you become a real estate investor. And so I just got to talk to people about it. Right? I talked about this book and real estate, and most people I talked to had no interest and didn't know what I was talking about. I'm like, that's fine. I'm going to sell more surfboards. I'm going to keep talking to people, and eventually found someone that, man, that's what I do. I love it, and I'm working on this project. And so we had this conversation. I'm selling him the surfboard, and I just said, this is my opportunity. Like, I need to get to know this person even more, because if I don't make a move, he's going to leave and I'm never going to see him again. And so I said, I found out a little bit more about the active problems that he was having, and he was in the value add space, and he was dealing with contractor issues and things like that. I was young, but I grew up where my dad has a construction company, a roofing company. So I had some experience, manual labor and solving some problems. And I just said, hey, I'm going to show up tomorrow. I'm going to help you with that. I didn't say, can you be my mentor? The words never came out of my mouth. I didn't say, can you hire me? That wasn't my goal. I just said, what can I do to add value? So I showed up, and he was taken back. He's like, why would you do that? I'm like, to be honest, this is the best conversation I've had in months with anyone. If we continue this conversation at a bare minimum, I think it's worth my time. And I don't consider that work. That's something that I love doing. So I'm going to try to add value to you. And so I did that, and then he saw value. And then eventually I figured out, what can I do next to add value? And, and while we're doing that, I'm asking questions, and I say, I work at a surf shop. I clearly don't have money to invest. What's the next step, right? And I had to figure out, how do I add value to him to actually be involved in a deal? And there's three things to any real estate transaction. It's who's finding the deal, right? That's one part. Who's bringing the money or funding the deal, and who's developing the deal, who's overseeing and managing the deal. One, I didn't have experience to develop a deal, and I didn't have money to fund the deal. So I had to learn how to go find deals. And me finding deals allowed me to earn a little bit of money. I didn't know it's called wholesaling at the time, but that really wasn't my goal. I wanted to earn partnership or equity in a deal that I can watch and do. And I was able to partner with that mentor, and eventually several mentors, by finding deals and saying, I don't want any money. I want to have equity in this. So it's going to be a free deal for you, but let's partner on this. And not everyone was willing to do that, but I found a few that were saying, yeah, that makes sense. So I tried to add value as much as possible. And it worked out. And eventually I was able to save up enough to kind of break off my own and start doing my own deals, and leverage them for knowledge in more traditional senses, less partnerships, but more mentorship there.
That is so valuable. And I have talked to so many people. One person in particular worked in another investor's company for 6 months. He had a job, and he would go over there after his job and worked free of charge. But in doing that, he learned every aspect of the business. He never regretted it. In fact, he said, this is the best education I ever got that I didn't have to pay for. It was free. I gave my time, but it was free.
Absolutely.
Now, when it comes to coaching, I have mentors as well. And I also have always believed you need to invest in coaching. If you want to get to the next level, no matter where you are, you can only go so far on the free line. Like you said, when I started, there were no podcasts. There was one seminar every year, and it was called OREA. It was in Cincinnati. That we look forward to that every year, but there were none of these tools that when the internet was barely there. So you had to get creative in learning things. But once I got down the road a little bit, I learned very quickly that you could take the long road, because the information is somewhere that you need. But finding that information in a concise thing is kind of like trying to get a college degree and not just getting it piecemeal. But if you can find a coach that has done what you want to do, or is already where you are, you can just go so much further, so much faster.
It is. And it's understanding, and there's so many different forms of coaches, and I would say it's easier than ever, but it's also easier than ever to maybe go down the wrong path, or find the wrong guru that's going to take you 50 grand of your money, and you're not going to get anything out of it. So there's so many great programs out there, so many great teachers. It's just kind of how do you find the one that actually makes sense. Starting out, I would much rather someone, sure, you're gonna have to pay for education, you're gonna have to, sacrifice, but I've seen too many people go into the $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 courses without ever doing a deal. And then they're coming out of that with knowledge overload and still not able to do a deal. Some of those courses, absolutely, I've seen people benefit from, but it's usually after you have some level of experience. I really am a believer of, you just got to get into a deal, get into, even if you're partnering with someone, even if it's a very small deal, even if it's not going to change your life, you need some experience versus reading about it or watching it on YouTube. You need to say, okay, I went through this. These were the problems that I never even thought were going to come up. I resolved them. At the end of the day, I didn't make as much money that I thought I was, but it was a great education. And now I know what questions to ask. Now, if I
Mhm.
take this course or get this next level of coaching, I think it's going to be much more relevant.
Mhm.
I pay for more coaching now than I ever have in my career because I know what questions to ask. I know what problems
Mhm.
I've come into. And if I spent the money that I'm spending now, let's say 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I wouldn't get the value out of it. I wouldn't
Mhm.
even know what conversations to have. And so I think it is you're upping your mentorship expectations and your coaching expectations and
Mhm.
your kind of club group expectations based on your personal experiences. So you're starting at the bottom typically, and then as you do a deal, as you run into this issue, you're like, all right, I need a mentor that can help me on this and what I'm getting into, or I need a coach that can help me on this problem
Mhm.
and what I'm getting into this year.
Yeah, I agree completely. And the problem that I see with some of those high price programs is the same as you see. They get so much information thrown at them, they cannot possibly absorb all of it. And they come out, they've spent all their money on the coaching program and they have no money to even do any marketing or buy any deals. And that's a really serious problem because without knowing how to source deals, you are dead in the water. I don't care how much
Yeah,
knowledge you have.
yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about now. Did you start out with single family homes or multifamily? What did you start out with?
Yeah, single family, more particularly condos in Hawaii.
Hmm.
And so I grew up on the mainland of Hawaii. There's Waikiki. And so, there's condos. They were called condo hotels back then, which is what Airbnb is,
Hmm.
to this day. And that was the lower price point properties that I was able to partner on or get into. Those were my first few, and then I went into single family rentals out of state, and then quickly shifted into small to mid-sized multifamily after that.
Okay. So I'm going to back up just a little bit and talk about this whole virtual investing thing. When you're investing in a market that's not in your own backyard, you have distinct challenges with building teams and oversight of those teams. So let's talk about that a little bit. How did you manage that?
Yeah, I wish all the technology that we have today, it's so easy today. And I
Hmm.
don't even want to say it's easy, but it's so much easier today. I mean, you have
Hmm.
video chat, right? You can hop on a
Right.
video chat with your property
Hmm.
manager, your contractor, versus before you're taking their word for it or sending a
Hmm.
photo. It really comes down to teams, and it's trial and error through hiring and firing the right people. And I've made
Hmm.
many mistakes on personnel, but ultimately the areas that I have continued to invest in are maybe not even because they're the best areas to invest. They're okay. They meet my minimum standard, but I found a rock star team there. I found
Hmm.
the agent, I found the investor mentors, I found the property managers and the contractors that create that complete team that I need, so that I'm not going there to hands-on oversee a project, because I'm a terrible property manager. I'm a terrible contractor. If I
Hmm.
kind of try to do it all myself, I know that's a recipe for failure.
Hmm.
I need to hire and unfortunately sometimes fire those people, and just making sure that you have the reserves, at least starting out, to be able to do that. Because if you think you're buying a property and it's going to start cash flowing right away, sometimes it does. But if you don't have the right team and you have huge turnover, bad tenants, or whatever it may be, the reality is that's a costly mistake that you need to
Hmm.
be able to absorb until you get the right team in place.
And that story is so common. I hear that over and over again, that it's so hard to know if you've got the right people. And maybe one of those people that's maybe not the right person refers you to the next person. Maybe it's the agent has the contractor, or maybe it's vice versa. But that is the part that is just so hard to get right. But if you do get it right, um, then there's so much opportunity. We'll say that if you're in an expensive area, you can move to an area that has more affordable properties, and your net income just grows so much more than if you're in those expensive areas.
Yeah, I would say that the last thing on that is, less of finding the perfect agent or property manager that fit into my system, and more finding people that have the right qualities, right? Ability to communicate. Obviously you're gauging them on how trustworthy you think they are, what sort of references or referrals. Is it someone that has an agent, a real estate investor that you trust in the area recommended them, that might go on a little bit easier. That being said, every property manager and every agent is terrible if you don't have the right expectations. So it's setting the expectations up with them in the beginning of, here's when you have qualities that I think we can work with, but here is my standard operating procedure. Here is what would make me happy as an investor. And my goal every time I go into the market is to be the number one investor in that area. My goal when I talk to a property manager is to be their number one client. And I tell them that. I say, here's what I do. Right now, I'm talking about one property with you, or 3 doors, or whatever it is. But here's my track record, or here's my plan. And I want to buy every single property that comes available, that cash flows, that makes sense around you. And the only reason I would do that is if this investment works out. And then the next one I give you works out. And working out is, here are the numbers, here are the metrics, here's the communication, here is, my minimal involvement. I need to give you autonomy of, one, taking control, but also understanding that how the numbers look at the end of the day, how happy my tenants are so they don't move, every single year. That all factors into whether or not I continue to invest, or whether or not I continue to employ you. And the ones that are, I guess, more growth oriented, the ones that are saying, man, I could see adding another 20, 30, 40, 50 units over the next few years with this one investor. If I treat him as a priority, then my business grows. And the ones that did not see that, or did not want to grow to those levels, the results showed that, and we parted ways at some point.
When you self-managed, or when you had your condos, those were your first properties. Did you self-manage those properties?
Some of them, yes. Some of them, yes. So some of those early ones were fix and flip. And the ones that were in condo hotels, they were, Airbnb wasn't a thing back then. You can own a unit in a condo, but there's a front desk hotel management system, so you let them manage it as well. So I did have a few scenarios on long-term rentals that I self-managed, and I'm terrible at it. I'm a softie. The reality is, oh, you didn't pay rent? Okay, well, okay, then I'll check with you next month, right? So
my mom died 3 months in a row.
Exactly. Everyone has a story, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense, right? And so I'm the worst property manager. I would never hire me, because I'm going to tell you, the rent's always going to be late, and they were probably not going to charge them a penalty fee. So I needed someone else that was willing to do that. I need someone else to like have that like, here is a plan. Now they can blame this landlord that has these strict rules of, yeah, I'm sorry, you have to pay rent, but the reality is I'm not good at that. And so I quickly knew I needed to get good at hiring people that were good at that.
It is a business, and I think sometimes it's hard, but incidentally, both my daughters are property managers, very different models. One is, I tell people, my one daughter's an employee, and she manages large multifamilies, and she does a very good job at it. And my other daughter's the entrepreneur. She manages a huge portfolio of properties, just her, like a couple hundred. And she has learned very well to say, look, this is a business. If my owner doesn't collect the rent, then he can't pay the mortgage. It's just that simple. It's not about, but she's very compassionate, but at the same time, she's very firm. And that this is a business, and it has to be this way. But not all of us. I was a softie too. When I wasn't the best. I was bad at giving people second chances. We'll say that. Yep. So, it is a business, and you need someone that can run it as a business for you if you're going to make money at it.
Agreed.
Now, I think I read somewhere that you sometimes, once you moved into small multifamily properties, small to mid multifamilies, that you found opportunities to buy portfolios of properties. And I wanted to just touch on that a bit for someone who might be wondering, how do you do that? And does that go back to your property manager, to your relationships that you have, those sorts of things?
Yeah, that is such a hack for anyone that wants to kind of get into this, cash flow growth space that's not getting into large apartment buildings and multifamily. Buying portfolios or solving that problem, because there's a problem around that. Solving that problem definitely gives you a competitive advantage. I stumbled across it several years ago by accident. I was trying to buy a deal, and it turned out at the very end, the landlord could not sell that deal to me because it was on a blanket mortgage loan across all
Oh.
these properties. Like he was free and clear for a while, and he took out a blanket loan across all of them, right? Some equity makes sense. Like, I understand why he did it, but he didn't understand that he could not sell that one property. And I'm like, man, this deal, I want this deal. And he's like, I want to sell it to you, but my bank just told me I can't sell it to you. And so that's where I'm like,
Mm.
man, that sounds like a problem. How big is this problem? And it turns out mom and pop landlords all over run into that problem. It is hard to sell your entire portfolio. Even if you own them free and clear and you got 10 or 20 properties and you are just saying, you know what, today, because rarely entrepreneurs, rarely do we plan for our future like in advance.
Mm.
It's usually like, man, I've had it. Today's the day, right? That's how it is. Today's
I'm
the day.
done.
I'm done.
Done.
Like, that's the last toilet. That's the
Mm.
last late, whatever it was.
Mm.
There was one last straw, and
Mhm.
now you're sitting on 20 properties and you're saying, I wish I'm in Florida. Why am I here in this cold dealing with this broken pipe issue or whatever it is? So if you're managing
Mhm.
yourself as a small mom and pop, that's usually the pain that you've lived in. And the problem is you've probably kind of ran your numbers and your margins, not paying a property manager because you were your own property manager. So your rent did not have to be market rent. And so now you're thinking, if I offload this to someone
Mm.
else and start paying a property manager, my profit goes away. And so it's not
Mhm.
even that good of an investment. Now, you caused that issue by not keeping market rents over the years, but you didn't have to because you weren't paying yourself as a free property manager.
Mhm.
And so they get into this issue and they're like, all right, it could take me a year or two or three to correct all this with a property manager and be able to afford to keep these, or do I sell them off? And if I sell them off, one at a time to investors, it might take me a year or 2 years to get through that. So that's the problem. And understanding that that problem exists, and you start to say, I'll figure out your problem. I'll buy your entire portfolio,
Mhm.
right? I don't want all of those properties. I'm going to be honest with you. Don't want it. That's a dog. That's a dog. But you have some gems in there. And I understand you need to offload them all. I'll buy the entire portfolio. Here's what makes sense. And if it makes sense for them, then I take on the burden of refinancing and making sure I have debt individually on each of those on the back end, like a burr structure. I take on the
Mhm.
burden of selling off, maybe fixing up and selling off the ones that I don't want to keep, or wholesaling them out. So it becomes a project for me, but that's what I do. I solve problems, and I like these active
Mhm.
projects, and I become a very unique solution to a very unique problem in the market,
Mhm.
with not much competition at all. So as I wanted to buy more and more rental properties, that became a way for me to have fewer transactions, but buy more properties. In 2021, my goal was to, we normally would buy, 5, 10, 15 properties a year for going back quite some time. I don't
Mhm.
want to scale up and push myself. Can I buy one property a week? I said
Mhm.
52 properties in 52 weeks. And so that was, and I told the world, I'm going to go buy 52 properties in 52 weeks. And it's more than I've ever done, but what can I do to get there? And I was just kind of, had several of these portfolio transactions under my belt at that time, and said, all right, here's a way that I can do that. I don't need 52 transactions. I need a handful of really good transactions. Ultimately didn't get to 52 properties by the end of the year. I closed on 46 by the end of the year, but that was still my best year to that date.
Mhm.
And the only reason is because I bought in bulk, 5 properties at a time, 8 properties at a time, 12 properties at a time. And that got me to where I was.
Mhm. Well, I can't skip this part of the show because I'm a marketing nerd. So I want to know about your marketing and how you find these deals.
Yeah, I'm terrible at marketing, to be honest. I understand the concept, and I could be really, really good at it. I know I could. I
Mhm.
teach it all the time, but I am such a private person. Like, being on this podcast is hard for me. I'm an introvert at heart. I'm social media. I know how important it is in the tool. To be honest, I don't do much on there, and I'm trying to like break myself out of this shell. And I married someone who's even more private than I am, and so we kind of like feed into each other. Yeah, let's not talk about this. Let's not do anything there. So the actual marketing piece, is something that I have not leveraged other than the last few years when I've like, all right, this is ridiculous. We need to break out of our shell. We need to start building a brand around this, but it's still fairly new. It's all been relationships. It's everything has been relationships. So it is my property managers telling them I want to be their number one client. And by the way, you are going to be talking to people that hate their life and they want to exit like in any given moment. And it might catch you by surprise because they were great clients for you. And now they don't want you to repair their property, whatever it is. I want you to think of me first. I want you to call me first because I want to make them a fair offer to help them exit. And if I buy the property, you keep the rental properties. If anyone else buys a property, it's like a 50-50 shot at best. You're not keeping those. You might lose that entire portfolio to another property manager, or you might lose that entire portfolio if they're selling off one by one to individual owners or things like that. So it became a win-win for my property managers to think, man, I have this landlord that one is a responsible landlord that is running a responsible portfolio. If I help him grow, then that helps me maintain my business at the bare minimum, and then maybe even grow my business. So property managers, my brokerage, as I start to train agents how to find deals and even off-market deals, helping them buy deals. Not many of my agents buy portfolios. And so I became a unique solution through that as well. And then my education group, my meetup club, Cash Flow Breakfast Club as well. A lot of deals came sourcing through that. Those are newer to intermediate investors. We have several really experienced investors in there, but often people are looking for the one or two deals. And I keep telling them, I buy portfolios. They come across a deal that they can't take down on their own or they can't take down. They think of me first. And I've received a lot of referrals that way.
It's funny that you don't think that that's marketing, because when I talk about marketing and that you need ideally 4 or 5 ways to get deals in the door, I'll talk about direct mail. I'll talk about content creation, which you've just said you don't like to do, but you do very well. Podcasts and other kind of content, websites. You've got to have a website. You have a website. And then the one that is the most overlooked on the planet is networking and building relationships. Yep. And you have proven, you have proven that you can be very successful at this. And I know a woman in California that at the time I talked to her, probably 5 or 6 years ago, she had bought over 100 properties and she had never sent out a single marketing piece. She did it solely through relationships and through networking and holding meetups and things like that. So it can be done. There's no one way to do marketing, but that is a very valuable, highly underrated, highly underused strategy for finding deals. So I congratulate you on that, because you've obviously nailed that. And I was going to actually ask you, what do you think your competitive edge is? But I already know the answer to that. It's your relationships, it's your networking, and the way you operate your business. So, folks, you should take a page out of Omni's book here. If you are introverted, it's hard to believe, but I used to be really introverted. You can definitely change that, but you can also leverage that and to your benefit. We'll say that you can leverage that to your benefit in that you lean into the things that you're really comfortable with, the things that you're good at, things like that. So good way to go, Omni.
Thank you.
Let's talk about your book here before we wrap this up. Your Cash Flow Breakfast Club. So I know you mentioned it before, and it seems to be a parable book, which is kind of a story about your story, that sort of thing. So tell everybody about your book and where they can get that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's called the Cash Flow Breakfast Club. My wife and I were the authors. Probably wrote it 2-3 years ago. It's kind of been a working document, and just wasn't ready to publish it. I wrote it as my story of like what I
Mhm.
did, actual transactions. Here's where I messed up. Here's where it worked out.
Mhm.
And I still have a hard time talking about my story, right? And so last year we converted it to a power parable. So it's not Omni, it's Dan, and it happens
Mhm.
to be a guy that grew up in Hawaii. It happens to be a guy that got into real estate and real estate investing. So 95% of that is still my story. It talks about the mentors that I was able to kind of connect with. And then I kind of brought in my current story of a lot of the mentorship that I do now to help, budding investors. And so it's about anyone, and it happens to be about real estate, but anyone that wants to get to the high level of whatever business or venture they're getting to, is the importance of those connections, the importance of relationships, and how many people you probably could find if you just got more comfortable at talking to people about it and
Mhm.
seeking out people to have these conversations. Because one conversation turns into, well, you should talk to this guy, or you should go to this meeting, or you should go
Mhm.
to this event, and that just might change your life. In the story, there's very clear steps: do this, do this, do this, do this, and that means you have X amount of properties, and that might mean that meets your financial freedom goal. So it's very tactical advice as well, and it's very boring. It's don't spend all your money, save it, buy real
Mhm.
estate, save that, buy more real estate, and keep doing that with core principles in place of how to protect yourself. But it is more of a story of, kind of overcoming the mindset of a very skeptical mindset, if you will. Anyone coming from outside of real estate for the first time getting into real estate often has a skeptical mindset, especially being that we came out of, the last crash we came out of. Depending on your age at that time, that impacted us drastically. And this economy that we're getting into right now might impact the next generation. And so just understanding what the mindset is and how do we get over that mindset and maybe take responsible approaches to real estate. And can we turn this into something that becomes passive income so that it can be your retirement plan, or at least a supplement to your retirement plan. So
Mhm.
called the Cash Flow Breakfast Club. And it's we're proud of it. It's already working on the sequel to this, but so far you can get on Amazon in e-version, Audible, and print version as well.
And I will put the links to the book, to his website, and the social media, and all those things in the show notes. So I can honestly say you're the only person I've ever known that has flipped surfboards. That is a
Yes,
story in itself. So if you can flip surfboards, folks, you can certainly flip houses. Okay.
agreed.
Okay. So thanks again, Omni, for coming on the show. And thanks to all the listeners for coming out today. I appreciate it. And please share this show if you loved it. And I know you did. And leave us a rating and a review on iTunes. It actually helps people find us. So I will see you all same time, same place next week. Bye for now.